I would like to tell you about my experience with caffeine, how I started, how I got addicted, and how I eventually quit ingesting the substance. Caffeine is a drug that stimulates the body and mind. It makes people feel more energized and motivated. I've actually been unknowingly consuming caffeine since I was a kid. My family had a tradition of drinking black tea. We drank it during breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And even though caffeine is a strong stimulant, I didn't feel any of its effects back then. The only thing that I can think of now is that I sometimes had trouble falling asleep after drinking lots of black tea. Tea didn't affect me much back then, probably because it was diluted with lots of water and thus it wasn't too strong. Later on, I also tried coffee in the form of cappuccino, but again, I didn't notice any strong effects. I got hooked on caffeine substances later on in life in my university. I went to a computer science university, which according to ChatGPT has a dropout rate of about 50%. That may be true for the first semester, but in my personal experience, the actual dropout rate is about 75%. Since in my first year there were a little over 1,000 students enrolled, and in my third year, the last year of the bachelor's program, only about 200 students were defending their thesis. During my time there, I studied every day, I felt stressed and overwhelmed. I figured that maybe caffeine could be this magic pill that would help me study and would make my life easier. I got this idea from Andrew Huberman and Andrew Tate, who spoke positively about this substance.
On mood and well-being, to be exact. Now, it's also the case that caffeine can improve mental performance and physical performance. This has been demonstrated in tens of thousands of studies.
Caffeine's a miracle.
Yeah.
I drink endless coffee. And of course, the Matrix will come along and say, too much coffee is bad for you, too much meat's bad for you. They say anything to make you weak and stupid. Yeah. Caffeine, people don't understand that coffee changed the world.
What really interested me was the fact that caffeine improves alertness and focus. So to improve my studying, I started drinking coffee every morning. I measured my intake to be in the range from 100 to 300 milligrams of caffeine, just like Huberman advised. This amount is yielded from about 1 or 2 coffee cups. During the first few days, I really got a lot done. I felt great. Out of all the things that are supposed to give you energy, like working out or eating healthy, caffeine was the only thing that actually worked. It actually made me want to get stuff done, and I did feel more efficient. My mind was functioning faster, and I felt more focused. I also did more push-ups during my main workout, and I even had energy for yoga after it. However, I noticed that I had trouble falling asleep, even while I was drinking a supposedly normal amount and only in the morning before 12 o'clock. Caffeine was most likely still in my system by the time I went to sleep. This concerned me quickly because on the other end of the spectrum from Huberman and Andrew Tate, there is this Finnish guy whose name is Petu. He has a successful YouTube channel. He is a high-ranked League of Legends player who also does great in his computer science studies. He says that the fundamental part of his success is sleep, and that he doesn't drink any alcohol or caffeine at all, so that he maximizes his sleep quality.
Okay, first of all, I do not use alcohol or caffeine, and speak and not even mentioning other drugs, right?
And indeed, after 1 week of drinking coffee, I started noticing more negative side effects. One of the side effects was waking up dehydrated. When I drank coffee, I had to go to the toilet often because of it, and I wasn't drinking enough water during the day to replenish the water loss. The other side effects were sleep deprivation symptoms. Many times I woke up feeling weak and hungry. I also had higher levels of anxiety. For example, in a shopping mall, I felt more anxious around many unknown people who were walking around me. I wanted to get away from there as soon as possible. As soon as I drank water and coffee, the tiredness, hunger, and weakness went away, and I could get a lot done in the morning. However, after lunch, I couldn't study that well. By that time, caffeine was still in my system, but at the same time, I was tired. I had this uneasiness. I couldn't just lie down in bed. I had to do something. But at the same time, I had trouble concentrating on one task and would tend to watch TikTok-like content. So I couldn't study and I couldn't rest or fall asleep either. My guess is that during this first week, caffeine depleted most of the resources of my body, and then I got into this cycle of stagnation. I couldn't study the whole day anymore, and I started noticing that I could do less during my workouts and that I didn't progress in my strength. I realized that all these negative effects probably had to do with my sleep, and I decided to quit. And indeed, I started getting more and better sleep, and I felt more power during my workouts and overall during the day. I ate a lot, replenished the resources of my body, and felt overall better. During quitting, I surprisingly didn't feel any headaches as some people do. There was only one thing that was bothering me, and it was the fact that I didn't feel as motivated during the day, and I was lacking that concentration and the speed of mind I got from caffeine. Quitting caffeine honestly didn't give me any extreme energy levels that some people report after quitting.
Feel like a light bulb went off, feel super clear-headed, super just energized and focused and like ready to go run a marathon or write an essay or do something super fun. And
my energy levels were more stable, but I would be way less excitable, and it would be more difficult for me to do boring things that had to be done, like memorizing a mathematical definition. The truth is that caffeine really did help me with powering through some mathematical formulas and also some programming tasks. My mind often wanders off during its natural state, especially when I would see a complex definition or a formula, and on caffeine I would actually be more inclined to look into that formula rather than trying to avoid it. Not wanting to get rid of that focused state, I decided to further experiment with caffeine, but with different sources, hoping that I wouldn't get any more of these side effects. So I went on to try drinking green tea and black tea. I even got my hands on yerba mate, seeing how Huberman advertised it.
They produce very large amounts of GLP-1. They isolate the peptide from GLP-1, then they looked for the analogous peptide in humans, and it turns out that does exist. And as I mentioned, it's released in both brain and body to make you feel full and sated. Now, why am I telling you all this? Well, today we're going to talk about caffeine, and there's one particular caffeine source, which is yerba mate. And there's some other forms of teas similar to yerba mate that stimulate the release of GLP-1 significantly.
As I mentioned earlier, I did try yerba mate and all the other caffeine beverages. Every caffeinated drink would be consumed in the morning. I made sure it was before 12 o'clock. The effect was pretty much the same for all of these drinks. They gave me more focus and more energy, and I even got more reps during my workouts at first. But after a week, I would feel sleep deprivation symptoms. I would feel weaker, I could do less during my workout sessions, I'd be more hungry and would be more inclined to scroll on Instagram or on YouTube. However, the energy boost and efficiency during my morning study sessions remained. Over the time span of a couple months, I had these cycles of drinking caffeine and not drinking it, not being entirely sure whether it's good for my health or not. On one hand, mostly on the internet, the benefits of caffeine are stated. Even ChatGPT encourages caffeine consumption for health benefits. On the other hand, I felt that it is not entirely good for me. Before deciding to quit caffeine completely, I drank a lot of coffee near my final exams. I knew that it was not entirely good for me in terms of health, since I experienced back pain and knee pain, and I connected that with drinking caffeine, since it depleted me from sleep and probably even minerals and other nutrients. So my body couldn't regenerate that well. One of the reasons why I also wanted to quit was because I got exposed to the information that caffeine decreases blood flow to the brain by about 30%.
The thing that I discovered, which I had never ever heard of, and it was mostly being talked about 11 years ago on a couple news channels, is that when you consume caffeine, the blood flow to your brain decreases by 22 to 30%, maybe even more than that. There's this one journalist who ended up having a scan done before drinking coffee and after drinking coffee, and for her, it decreased her blood flow to the brain 40%. Now, in what world do I want to decrease the blood flow to my brain 20 to 40%? There's no way. How in the world could that be good for me? And it is honestly concerning that I've been consuming caffeine for so many years, decades, that what could that do to the brain? What type of adaptations does the brain have? And what does that do to the brain over a period of 20 years where you're lacking in blood flow to that degree?
What was stopping me from quitting was the fact that I was afraid of not being efficient. I was afraid that if I quit coffee, I would not be able to pass the finals. I knew that quitting before the finals was not the best idea, but I decided to do that anyway, since health is one of my life priorities. So I tried not drinking any caffeine again. But on day one, I immediately felt like I was not doing enough since I couldn't concentrate that well. I got stressed and drank a cup of coffee the same day. As you can probably see, my addiction was more psychological than physical. I thought that I cannot perform without it. So in order to quit completely, I reminded myself of all my achievements that I did off caffeine. I passed my university entrance exams, did well there even without drinking caffeine, and did well with my workouts. The other day I quit caffeine. I didn't feel any headaches, I just felt a little weak and anxious. I drove our family car in that state. I felt a bit loose during the driving, but I did it safely and even managed to park well enough. Upon arriving back home, I took a nap and slept very well. After a couple of days of sleeping well and eating well, I got my strength back, my knee pain and back pain got better, and even though I didn't feel as concentrated, I still could finish up preparing for my final exams and even pass them and got my bachelor's degree. Overall, off of caffeine I feel well rested, less hungry, and more physically powerful, less anxious, and more stable during the day. Thanks to better sleep, I get less crazy or aggressive. My mental health gets better and my physical health gets better as well, since my knee and back hurt less. However, even though I eat relatively healthy, I don't notice any crazy good energy levels, as some people report. In my case, while being on caffeine, I feel more energized and driven. I also feel like my mind functions faster on it, despite the blood flow to the brain being restricted. So, of caffeine, I feel better in terms of physical health, but on it, I feel better mentally. I think I get more things done and that I eat less sugar since caffeine blunts appetite. What is interesting is that the feeling of making more things done may be an illusion. You may feel better and do more, but the quality of your work may actually not be as good.
Even the spiders know that caffeine only creates the illusion of productivity, the illusion of accomplishment. But if you look at an actual spider web under the influence of any other drug but caffeine, they all look quite amazing. They all look symmetrical, beautiful, and functional. However, the one spider web that stands out is the caffeinated spider. For some reason, this one spider web just looks like trash. However, I'm sure that this motherfucker went to bed thinking that he was the boss that night. He was feeling pretty good about himself when he went to bed, thinking that he's gonna catch a lot of flies while he's sleeping. And that, my friend, is the problem with caffeine. It only makes you feel like you're accomplishing things.
So the spider on caffeine made the worst web, and he may have felt good about it. But well, spiders aren't humans, and the fact that they make worse webs on caffeine doesn't really mean that people do worse work off caffeine. The dose for the spider may have even been very high, maybe even close to an overdose. But it still poses the following question. When you are working on caffeine, are you really working on something meaningful and get a lot done, or does just caffeine make whatever you are working on feel good and makes it feel like you get a lot done? Maybe people do worse when they drink too much of it, or if they drink it for the first time because of overstimulation and jitteriness, but when their body gets used to it and they drink reasonable amounts, they may actually do more work faster and better. One thing suggesting that caffeine may actually make people do better is that caffeine is connected to the age of enlightenment.
Before and after, which we don't with a lot of drugs because they just go back, millennia. And before caffeine, it was a very different world and a very different consciousness. People were drunk a lot of the time, buzzed almost all of the time. People drank morning, noon, and night because it was safer than water, right? Water was really how you got diseases. Mm-hmm. If you fermented things, even low alcohol, it killed all of the microbes. So people, even kids, you gave your kids hard cider for breakfast.
Wow.
And this was true in America up until the 1800s, up until Prohibition. But anyway, caffeine comes along in the 1650s, and tea and chocolate and coffee all arrive in the same decade in England, which is kind of like great decade, right? And things start to change.
In the form of coffee?
Coffee and tea and chocolate, which also has caffeine in it.
And so what would they had never experienced coffee before the 1600s?
That's right. They had in the Arab world. They'd had it from like 1200 or something like that. Supposedly it was discovered in 800s by a herder in like Ethiopia who noticed that his goats were getting very frisky when they ate this particular berry and would stay up all night. And so he kind of like started experimenting, or he brought it to these monks and they made a drink, and it's like, ooh.
It makes sense that it was in the Arab world, because if you think about all the science that was being done in the Arab world, all the literature back then.
So one
writing.
theory is that the Arab world had coffee first and had this incredible golden age.
Yes.
And there's a historian of psychoactives named Wolfgang Schivelbusch, and he correlates.
What a name.
Isn't that wonderful? German, of course. Wolfgang Schivelbusch. It's a great book. It's called Tastes of Paradise. Highly recommend it. And he said this was the perfect drug for the culture that invented mathematics and had this incredible, and it helped the culture in two ways. One was, as safe as alcohol made water, boiling it made it much safer. And coffee and tea, of course, both require boiling water. No one drank boiling water or hot beverages before. So this gave this incredible public health boost to these places. And then you have the drug that basically fosters a kind of more linear, rational, focused way of thinking. And so there is a lot of evidence linking coffee and tea consumption with the Enlightenment in France and with the Age of Reason in England. And people in the 1600s started writing about it. So like, wow, people, we have this new civil and sober drink and it was so popular because it was new that people drank less and they used more caffeine. And that, I think, makes possible things like the Industrial Revolution, because when you're doing physical labor outdoors, which was most of history, right? You could be buzzed. You didn't have to know what time it was. You worked from sun up to sundown. There were beer breaks actually on farms in England. They would give you beer because it gave you calories and made you happy. But when you start moving into like running machines and doing double entry bookkeeping, you need a clearer head. And when you start moving toward night shifts and overnight shifts, you couldn't do that without caffeine. And that's when it begins. There's a whole new, it freed us from the rhythms of the sun, which dictated everything in Western culture. You could only work till the sun went down. So it had a profound effect on capitalism, the rise of capitalism. And the clearest illustration of that I came across is the coffee break.
But did all of this enlightenment happen because caffeine really makes people smarter? Or was it because they just stopped drinking too much alcohol? Maybe people do best without any mind-altering drugs. You may say that there are studies saying that caffeine is good for you, but I would be careful about these studies since some of them are done on older people, and older people may be affected less than younger people since the organism of younger people is still growing. Results of the studies may also be easily fabricated, so you should always watch for your own reaction before determining whether to drink caffeine or not. The other thing is that even though studies suggest caffeine consumption with at most 400 milligrams per day is okay, it may still be too much for you personally. Another thing to worry about is the fact that coffee and caffeine is a profitable industry. Just like sugar or alcohol, caffeine is a drug that people can get lifelong addicted to. Billionaires can make money from coffee machines, different coffee types like instant coffee, coffee from a cafe, coffee in capsules, coffee from Africa, coffee from Vietnam. Having people drink coffee is profitable for the owners of the caffeine business, not only because people have to buy caffeine products, but also because they can do more work. Likely because of the influence of the caffeine companies, the negatives are not emphasized enough. See, one of the caffeine negatives is worse sleep, which can happen very easily even on supposedly healthy caffeine amounts. And the bad sleep leads to cognitive decline, less happiness, more craziness, more food consumption, and thus unnecessary weight gain, and the list goes on. Even if it seems that you sleep all right, some people, including me, report having less dreams. And less dreams means that you have less REM sleep, and REM sleep affects mood, memory, and even creativity. Keeping all that in mind, in the end, I am still not entirely sure whether quitting caffeine was a good idea or not. Being off of it, I feel a lot of cravings. I dream about drinking some coffee in the morning and having chocolate with it. Also, after a while, from restoring my sleep and physical strength, I start to feel like it's hard to do some important but boring things like studying or washing the dishes, since prolonged soberness makes me lazy. Maybe a little bit of caffeine in the morning is not that bad and may even be good. See, us civilized humans today, we live in an unnatural environment. We don't get enough fresh air, we have to sit by books or study by the computer. We are made for running, walking around all day, breathing fresh air, and getting sunlight in our eyes and on our bodies. Caffeine, like other drugs, makes this unnatural city life we live more tolerable. That's why it became so popular. If people lived in their natural environment, I don't think that they would need to take any drugs whatsoever and wouldn't get too addicted to them even after trying them. Since they would feel very good due to eating well, getting enough sunlight and fresh air, and from being connected to their tribe. That's why many people drink caffeine at work. It makes them feel more productive and thus less stressed, and they even enjoy work a little more if their job is boring in its nature. Another caffeine positive I have noticed is that I eat less sugar when on caffeine. I find that if I take one drug away from my life, then I get addicted to another. Let's say I quit coffee, then I eat more sugar. I quit computer games, I scroll more on YouTube shorts or Instagram reels. I would say that today's unnatural environment pushes people into certain addictions, and maybe caffeine is not the worst one of them. It makes you do stuff, it helps you do hard, boring things. These are the things that are usually valuable. Let's list a couple of examples. Anyone can watch a movie. Watching a movie is simple. Just open your computer and watch. That's why there is little value in watching it, and no one will pat you on the back after you do. But making a movie requires a lot of effort, and it may be boring or even stressful sometimes. But because not that many people can make good movies, making movies is more valuable than watching them. The same goes with books. Reading them is easier than writing them, and writers receive more money from writing a book than readers from reading it. Programming a computer game is way more difficult than playing it. And of course, being on caffeine or cocaine, in the case of some movie directors and actors, may help you in these stressful or sometimes boring environments, even though in the long run it may damage your health. But of course, there are successful people who don't consume caffeine or other stimulants. Mark Zuckerberg and Brian Johnson say that they don't.
Drink coffee, man, or no?
Nah.
Really?
Yeah,
I mean, you've had it.
I have. Sometimes on vacation, I'll drink it recreationally. It's like every once in a while.
You have a cup of coffee at 4 p.m. and your bedtime is 10 p.m. Caffeine has a half-life of 6 hours. So that means at 10 p.m. when your head hits a pillow, it's equal to having a half a cup of coffee. So you want to be mindful. Now, some people metabolize coffee in a way where they can drink caffeine at any time and they're fine, but others are much more sensitive, including myself. So I stopped caffeine and alcohol entirely because they disrupted my mood. They would take me up and then push me down, and I'd have this problem on my hands. Now with no caffeine and no alcohol, I'm very stable throughout the entire day. If you're going to drink caffeine, try to have it earlier in the day, but again, experiment on the right time that's not going to disrupt your sleep.
My experience turned out to be partially negative, but maybe I actually drank too much caffeine, considering my body weight of about 74 kilograms. Maybe even 2 cups of coffee were too much, and I should have just limited myself to 1 cup of coffee and drink it as soon as possible in the morning. Then it would leave my body soon enough, and it wouldn't affect my sleep that much. In the end, it is not clear whether drinking moderate amounts of caffeine is good for you or bad for you. Even scientists who study caffeine don't entirely understand its effects. So at least you should be scared of using it and be careful with it, since it's a drug that you develop addiction to. It may affect your sleep and it restricts blood flow to the brain. For me, even though I have been completely off caffeine for about 2 weeks, I still may experiment with lower amounts of caffeine and see if I can detoxify my body before falling asleep, since it did help me at some point in my studies and since most research says that moderate amounts can be beneficial even in the long run. What's your relationship with caffeine? Feel free to share in the comments. Feel free to check the description for further study as well. That's it for the video. It would make me happy if it opened your eyes on caffeine or if you have learned something new about it.